Hi everyone. Today I want to talk about counselor characteristics. These are the qualities and traits that I think counselors really need to really contemplate, think about as they pursue this career of becoming a professional counselor. Now, some of these fit with you, some of them may be a bit of a stretch, but I want to thank Corey, who is the author of our textbook, for providing these. And this list has been changed over the editions of the textbook, but I want to use this particular version and go down through the list. And I think it's important enough that I really want to actually read these to you and for you to follow along. So let's go ahead and go to the first slide, and I want to talk a little bit about counselor characteristics and qualities. So in our first slide, we really want to talk about this notion of identity, and it says this: effective counselors have an identity. They know who they are, what they're capable of becoming, what they want out of life, and what is essential. Although they have a clear sense of their priorities, they are willing to re-examine their values and goals. They are not mere reflections of what others expect or want them to be, but strive to live by internal standards. So here we have this notion that you have a unique identity. You form that identity with what you think is best, and you don't live up to all the expectations that others may have of you, but you set your own priorities. All right, let's take a look at the next slide. They respect and appreciate themselves. They can give help and love out of their own sense of self-worth and strength. They are also able to ask and to receive from others, and they do not isolate themselves from others as a false demonstration of their strength. They respect and appreciate others. All right, let's go to the next slide. They're able to recognize and accept their own power. Therapists feel adequate with others and allow others to feel powerful with them. They do not diminish others so that they can feel a sense of power. They use their own power and model its healthy uses for clients, and they avoid abusing it. You know, the notion is that as a therapist, you have a great deal of power when someone comes in to ask you for help. It puts you into a power position. It's something you can't back away from, but it's something that you need to understand. You know, a lot of people use the term empowerment, this notion of empowering others. So with this particular slide, there's a lot of information about the use of power in the therapeutic relationship. All right, let's move on to the next slide. Now, in this slide, therapists are open to change. Rather than settling for less, they extend themselves to become more. They exhibit a willingness and a courage to leave the security of the known if they're not satisfied with what they have. Another way to put that is that they really have modeled the kind of behavior and are modeling behavior for the clients that they see, to take risks, to step out of what is comfortable and known to something that may be a little frightening, may be a bit of a risk, but knowing that this is a way and a path to growth. The next slide. Therapists are expanding their awareness of self and others. They realize that if they have limited awareness, they also have limited freedom. Instead of investing energy in defensive behaviors designed to block out experiences, they focus on reality-oriented tasks. Very important notion. Let's go to the next slide. Counselors are willing and able to tolerate ambiguity. Now, this is important because what we find is that there are lots of answers to a single question. As a matter of fact, you may find that in the theories we're studying in this class that there are many different solutions to a particular problem. So that really means that you as a therapist have to tolerate ambiguity, this notion that there are many answers to a particular question. Now further, the slide goes on to say that most of us have a low threshold for coping with a lack of clarity, because growth depends on leaving the familiar and entering unknown territory. People who are committed to personal development are willing to accept some degree of ambiguity in their lives. As they build their ego strength, they develop more self-trust, that is, trust in an intuitive process and judgment, and willingness to experiment with novel behavior. They eventually come to realize that they are trustworthy. So the notion here is that, as you take a risk and you help others to take risks, what you find is you have become, it makes aware to you that you have a sense of trust about yourself, and that trustworthiness is essential in the process of change. Let's look at the next slide. They are developing their own counseling style. It is an expression of their philosophy of life and an outgrowth of their life experiences. Although counselors may freely borrow ideas and techniques from many other therapists, they do not mechanically imitate another's style. Now, here we have to say that there are theories out in the world that we're going to use, and these were invented by a lot of other people and been changed and altered in lots of ways. But the notion is you're not imitating. What you're doing is being live and in the moment with the client that you see, and to use these therapy tools, the theories that we will study, as tools in this process to help the client change in the way that we are expecting. So let's take another look at a different slide. They can experience and know the world of the client, yet their empathy is non-possessive. They are aware of their own struggles and pain, and they have a frame of reference for identifying with others, while at the same time not losing their own identity by over-identifying with others. Now, this is an interesting notion because some people ask, well, if you're seeing clients all day in a clinic or at school, in an agency of some sort, with all of these difficult problems, don't you bring that home with you? Doesn't that follow you? Well, the truth is that sometimes it does. However, we do have to set limits between us and the people that we're helping. We cannot become fused. We cannot become overly attached to those people in their hurt and pain. We have to identify with it, but we also have to keep a sense of self-identity so that we're able to be objective and that we're able to help in the best possible way. Now, in another slide, Corey talks about this notion. They feel alive, their choices are life-oriented, and they are committed to living fully rather than settling for mere existence. They do not allow events to shape them, for they take an active stance toward life. So there may be things that happen in our lives that change us. There may be tragedies that we come to know as part of our lives, and we do not let that shape us. We have some control in that process, and we can talk about that some more. But let's go to the next slide. Counselors are authentic, sincere, and honest. They do not live by pretenses, but attempt to be what they think and feel. They're willing to appropriately disclose themselves to selected others. They do not hide behind masks, defenses, sterile roles, and facades. So this notion of being authentic, we're going to talk a lot about that. Some people have described that, particularly Rogers and others have described this notion of us really lining up with the way we feel, the way we think, and the way we behave in a line, that all of those line up together. And when we're doing that, we're in an authentic position. So let's move on to our next slide. These are counselor characteristics. Counselors have a sense of humor. They are able to put the events of life in perspective. They have not forgotten how to laugh, especially at their own foibles and contradictions. Their sense of humor enables them to put their problems and imperfections in perspective. They make mistakes and are willing to admit them, although they are not overburdened by guilt over what they could or should have acted. They learn from their mistakes. They do not dismiss their errors lightly, yet they do not choose to dwell on misery. Now that's an interesting slide because it talks about the notion of authenticity. You're willing to admit your mistakes, and that's tough. That's really tough for people sometimes to say, "Whoops, I made that mistake," and to admit it. We all want to be approved by others, and we want to do the best job. We don't want. Listen. it takes a fairly mature person to be able to admit those mistakes, make the corrections, and move on, and do not dwell in their misery. All right, the next slide. They generally live in the present. They are not riveted to the past, nor are they fixated on the future. They're able to experience the now and be present with others in the now. They can be with others in their pain and joy, for they're open to their own emotional experience. Well, this is an interesting notion here, and I think one of the things that we will find in some of the theories, particularly, say, the Gestalt theory, is a notion that we're in the current moment. We're working really in the here and now, and we're present, because that's what we have control of, and not the future and not the past, but this is what we have control of. And so when we acknowledge that, we can be fully present with the client. Let's move on to the next slide. Counselors are able to reinvent themselves. They can revitalize and recreate significant relationships. They make decisions about how they would like to change, and they work toward becoming the person they would like to become. This is an interesting notion about this journey that we have. Let's move on to the next slide. They are making choices that shape their lives. They are aware of early decisions they make about themselves, others, and the world. They are not victims of these early decisions, for they are willing to revise them if necessary, because they continually evaluate themselves and they're not restrained by limited self-definition. Well, we missed that slide there for just a moment. Well, I think the important part is that we are making choices about ourselves throughout our lives. We're aware of the early decisions. We are not victims of some of those processes, but we're able to really evaluate ourselves along the way. All right, let's move on. Counselors have a sincere interest in the welfare of others. This concern is based on respect, care, a sense of caring, trust, and a real valuing of others. It implies that we're willing to challenge people who are significant in their lives, but also to remain open to growth. We talked about this in an earlier presentation, this notion of support and challenge. And I really think that part of what we have to do is really learn that we can empathize, care, support, and challenge at the same time, that they're not mutually exclusive. And that's something that is really hard at first to begin for beginning therapists, but it comes with experience and maturity in this field as you become the professional. So let's move on to the next slide. Counselors become deeply involved in their work and derive meaning from it. They can accept the rewards flowing from their work. They can honestly admit the ego needs that are gratified by it. Yet they are not slaves to their work, and they do not depend on it exclusively to live a full life. They have other interests that provide them with a sense of purpose and fulfillment. Well, that's a great slide, because that really talks about this notion of meaning and having a full life that is not necessarily tied to our work, or the term workaholic in those notions. You know, some time ago I was working at a crisis intervention center in Asheville, North Carolina, at Blue Ridge Mental Health Center there, associated with Duke University Hospital. And one of the things I noticed about the crisis intervention people is that when their shift was over and they left, they really went out and had full lives. And we're in North Carolina in the mountains, and of course these guys were rock climbing and whitewater rafting and canoeing and those and hiking and so forth. And I came to realize that in order for them to do the best work possible that they could do, they really had to take care of themselves and to really have a full life and interest outside of work. And so it's really important for therapists to do that. All right, well, let's look at our final slide here now. These are counselors. They're able to maintain healthy boundaries. We'll talk a lot about boundaries. Although they strive to be fully present for their clients, they don't carry the problems of their clients around with them during leisure hours. They know how to say no, a very difficult word sometimes, which allows them to keep a balance in their lives. They are alert to signs of burnout and take care of themselves. Being an effective counselor does not involve unbounded giving and altruism. Isn't that an interesting notion? So client come to understand that the therapists that they're seeing have full lives themselves. But it's important for you to take a look at these guidelines, these characteristics of counselors, and really see if that applies to you, and see how there's something that you might be challenged by in this list of characteristics. So I want you to go back over, listen to this lecture again, go back over the slides, see how it fits for you, and let's talk about it as we can as it comes up in our work here in COUN 6155 Counseling Theory. I'll see you next time.